to Comanche, but not tornadic right now. These are still some strong storms with some wind and hail in them, but not worried about that. What we're worried about is on the front lip. And tornado now, this is going to be on the ground just north of Sulphur. Let's turn debris on here, and let's see which one is it. It's there, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, it looks like a tornado.
Sulphur, yeah.
It looks like we have debris in Sulphur. So Sulphur might have just taken a direct hit.
Hello everybody. As I'm sure you've heard, it's been quite an active season here in Tornado Alley. While there have been many confirmed tornadoes this year, I want to focus on the tornadoes that touched down in Oklahoma the night of April 27th, with an emphasis on Sulphur, which took a direct hit that night. Tornadoes are a part of nature, but they are among the worst parts. That night was very nerve-wracking for those of us in the paths of the supercells, but was especially so for those directly affected by the twisters. Luckily for me and my family, although 10 tornado-warned storms passed over us, the worst we experienced was high winds and torrential rain. However, Sulphur, which is just down the road from where I live, was rocked by a large EF3 tornado that night that killed one person, injured many more, damaged and destroyed homes, and devastated the downtown area. Sulphur is a bit of a hidden gem, home to, among other things, the Chickasaw National Recreation Area, which is a beautiful place with a great biodiversity. When my children were young, we made dozens, if not hundreds, of trips there for hiking, birding, camping, etc. And obviously, we shopped in the town and ate at the restaurants there. The tornado that night went right through the heart of the town. In addition to the one person who was killed, more than 30 were injured, some severely. The top wind speed was 165 miles per hour, which is at the very top end of the EF3 rating. 166 miles per hour would have made it in EF4. It touched down in the recreation area, damaged several homes on Tishomingo Avenue, then moved violently through another portion of the park, then through downtown and into a neighborhood in the northeast portion of town. 75 homes were damaged and some were destroyed. That day, into the overnight hours, was the definition of a tornado outbreak, with at least 30 tornadoes confirmed in Oklahoma alone. On Monday, April 29th, I walked among the damage in Sulphur and was taken aback by what I saw. I would say overwhelmed, but I have seen this sort of thing many times in the past, but more on that later. For the residents there, however, it most certainly was overwhelming. On Monday, many of them were out either volunteering or just walking around, astounded by what they saw. I spoke with Sulphur resident Ken York, who said he had very recently installed a motor in this overturned vehicle. He said the man who owned the vehicle was fixing it up to sell it. The man also owned this destroyed pizza restaurant, and also this pickup was the man's daily driving vehicle. York is a longtime resident of Sulphur and knows the town like the back of his hand. He said one of the destroyed buildings used to be a hardware store where he worked as a kid. Ken spoke about this bakery, which had been around for decades and was still in business when the tornado struck April 27th. When I was in high school, I made donuts in that bakery, he said. Before I go, let me just say that the volunteer spirit in Sulphur was quite evident when I was there. There were a lot of donations coming in, but there were many people volunteering to help. In fact, emergency management continuously ran out of vehicle sticker passes because they weren't prepared for the sheer number of people who showed up to volunteer. And electrical linemen came from all around to help restore electricity back to the area of the city without power. After rescue efforts, it was probably the number one goal in trying to get back to normal. Now I've seen a lot of damage. I toured neighborhoods after the May 3rd, 1999 tornado that went through Moore, Oklahoma, and that was probably the most devastating that I've ever seen. Just, I mean, in entire neighborhoods with nothing left but the concrete slabs. Everything else was just carried away. Probably the second worst I've ever seen was in 2009. Well, wait a minute. Let me start off real quick by saying this. When I was a kid, I was absolutely terrified of tornadoes. I mean, I was just terrified of them. I mean, I've lived my whole life in Tornado Alley, and I know what they can do, and I was terrified and scared. And when I was a teenager, and I was a young father, I was driving down the road, and I saw a tornado on the horizon. It was an EF3 tornado. Luckily, it didn't kill anyone. I think there were some, caused a few injuries. It was on the ground for quite a ways. And it was unbelievable just seeing it. It was a perfect wedge tornado. I mean, not a large wedge, just a perfect funnel. I mean, and so the town I was in, I pulled over and at a convenience store, and I got out on a payphone. We didn't have cell phones back then. And I got on a payphone, and I was calling my mother to say, hey, I just saw a tornado, and how crazy it was. And while I was standing there talking on the phone, I look up in the sky and I see what looks like vultures circling. And I thought, what on earth are vultures doing out in this weather? And as I'm looking more and more, I notice that they're roof shingles. And they're more, I mean, they're just getting, here comes the debris. I mean, it's just, oh no, this is a tornado. So I dropped the phone, and I got my wife at the time and my young child, and we went into the convenience store, into the bathroom where it was relatively safe. And the tornado passed by about 2 blocks from where we were. And I remember just how wild that was. It was an I think it was an EF1 tornado. Yeah, it was an EF1. But it did quite a bit of damage. It took out a gas station, a restaurant sign did a lot of damage, a lot of broken glass, flipped cars. It did some damage. And after that, I gotta say, I just stopped being terrified of tornadoes and became kind of infatuated with them. And for a while, I chased tornadoes a little bit. And anyway, I've kind of since stopped the tornado chasing for a little while, maybe indefinitely. And but getting back to the worst tornadoes that I've ever seen, like I said, the May 3rd, 1999 tornado that went through Moore, which was among the most devastating tornadoes ever. Another one that I saw was or didn't see the tornado itself, but a violent EF4 went through Lone Grove, Oklahoma, and that thing was on the ground for about 37 miles, and it killed a lot of people. I think it killed 11 people. And I mean, for going through such a rural area, and one of the places it hit was a mobile home park in Lone Grove, and it destroyed everything in that mobile home park. It destroyed the entire park. It killed people in that park, and I spoke with some residents there afterwards. I interviewed them for stories, and I remember, one guy telling me that he had taken his family and they had left out a couple of hours before, and came back and their mobile home was destroyed, and but he was just thankful to be alive. I saw a lot of terrible things, you always do, destroyed, and you see children's toys, and it's just so sad. And but there was a moment of, I came across this microwave that said free popcorn, and the microwave was plugged into a destroyed wall, and it was an attempt at humor by one of the residents who lived there. And then there was a tornado that started off kind of small in northern Pontotoc County, crossed over passed by Sasakwa, Oklahoma, and then went up to Holdenville. And it was on the west side of town in a rural area, but it wound up killing 2 people. And one of them was a 4-month-old baby girl. Just awful. I can't imagine what the parents must be going through. I just hope it's over. I'm just really tired of it.